People come to this from many different ways, but let's begin. And I am just very excited to be with all of you today, and I know all of presenters are. It is important for you to know that this is being recorded. Breakout sessions will not be recorded. We'll be doing that at one point. But if you do choose at some point to offer a comment that you will be part of the recording, we'll be editing as well, of course. My name is Shelley Manlev, and I have had the honor and privilege of hosting these sessions, which is schools and the opioid epidemic in the age of COVID. And I'm a public health fan. You can see my mask I was going to wear. Co-president of the New Mexico Public Health Association, and 20 years working with students and schools and the community as a prevention specialist and public health person. I want to take this moment to introduce our fabulous team. We have, again, Michelle Baroni and Cedric Hall and Alicia Wolf. They're just going to say hello. It's an opportunity to hear their voices. You can get excited. Each of them brings so much to this work. So Cedric, you want to say hello first?
Hello all, how are you? My name is Cedric Hall. It's a pleasure to be here with you from New York City. This is our third time around, and this has been a phenomenal series. So I hope you all are here to kind of be with us to learn as much as we're learning from you all as participants. Let's have a great day today.
We will. And Michelle Baroni from the South.
I'm gonna try to imitate Cedric, Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Doesn't matter what part of town you're in. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Baroni. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys and to just keep this discussion going. We've been having a good time the past couple of sessions, and I think this one is a good one too. And I'm really happy to hear the comments from those folks who've been participating in the past. I really do appreciate your feedback. It makes me feel good.
Great.
Well, enjoy, and I hope to see you guys soon.
You will. Michelle's runs an after-school program, been involved in prevention for years. Cedric's the principal of middle and high school in New York City. And then our last presenter is going to be doing the key part of this presentation, Alicia Wolf, a longtime colleague of mine. Alicia, you want to say hello and share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Happy afternoon. It's snowing here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I am currently the lead counselor at Edward Ortiz Middle School here in Santa Fe. And the main thing I'm doing to connect with families right now is, as I'm sure some of you have experienced, having disengaged students. So meeting with families, trying to figure out what's going on and how to get those students back involved in school. And hopefully we'll be giving you some ideas in terms of connecting with families and addressing these important issues. Great to be here.
And it's great. So you can see our team gives a rich range of experience, right? Myself, public health prevention coordinator at a Office of Student Wellness for a medium-sized school district in Santa Fe. Alicia, currently a middle school counselor, also served as prevention specialist, lots of experience in parent education, teaching in both English and Spanish, a skill I wish I had. Michelle working in this after-school program and working with families, and she'll share more about that. And Cedric, of course, as a building leader and as a real leader, a school principal. Really, it's great to have this variety of team. We hope as you ask questions that you take advantage of all those resources. And then I want to really thank the Opioid Response Network team, Rachel Whitmer and Brooke Fisher and Michelle Baker. We have two MBs, Michelle B's, and then Crystal Omer Romero, who's joining us for the first time. It's really fabulous. They're incredible folks. And that moves us to the next slide, which is to tell you just briefly about the Opioid Response Network. It is funded by SAMHSA to assist anyone working to address the opioid crisis, including working with youth educators, addressing substance use prevention, right? That's what we're doing here. Coalitions, grantees, other organizations and individuals, and they provide free technical assistance and resources like the webinar, that we've done, the first two webinars we've done in this series, and this Zoom meeting opportunity, this training opportunity, that will actually have an opportunity to practice. We'll be doing a breakout later, chance for a little feedback and interaction. They focus both on treatment and recovery and what's near and dear to my heart, which is prevention, because you cannot treat your way out of opioid issues, right? we've got to invest in prevention. Go to the next slide. They have a variety of consultants that, like the ones you're hearing from today, incredible people. I mean, really incredible people. They brought a training here to New Mexico, people that I was thrilled to have a chance to meet. And that the regional TTSs, technology transfer specialists, if you do make a request, they'll meet with you, hear what your need is, and pick somebody, find people, whether it's from your local state team or nationally, who can really meet your needs for training, resources. I've done a lot of interesting projects, policies, and of course, this focus on prevention for schools. To make a request, all you need to do is contact us. In terms of the next slide, it says opioidresponsenetwork.org. You can email orn@AAAP.org or make that phone number, that call. I feel like it's a little advertisement, right? But again, fabulous people, great technology transfer specialists who really will help meet your needs. Next. So let's dive into the work. And disclosures, of course. And we have to disclose in terms of no conflict of interest. And for those of you who do want CEs for this, you do need to complete the participation in this. It's not a webinar, in this training, this meeting, and everyone will receive a link to an evaluation. Please complete it. We have looked at the ones from the first two sessions, and we look forward to this one. It will take 4 to 6 weeks if you are applying for CEs. There are not social work CEs, unfortunately, Rebecca, I wish there were. They require things done much further in advance, but there are CEs for CHES, Certified Health Education Specialists, and for Certified Prevention Specialists. So we'll hopefully next time we can do social work, we'll work on that. But again, we do have any disclosures. The speakers have nothing to disclose, and there are a few disclosures here written in terms of the planning committee with the ORN. Thank you. Finally, this is accredited. The accreditation for the CHES CEUs are sponsored by the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Nursing and Health Studies. It didn't take me that long to learn to pronounce it. Thank you so much, really, to the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Next. So this is part of a larger project on youth and COVID-19 that the Opioid Response Network has supported. And there are other resources we encourage you to take a look at. Resources on schools and COVID-19 with links that are on the ORN, the opioidresponsenetwork.org website, a guidance brief that was done for middle schools, one that was done prior to COVID. We will be getting back in person someday, and a short 4-page, really, I think, valuable resource. I interviewed people from all across the country. How are you dealing with this virtual environment? And that is available, including as well the 2 prior recorded learning sessions, one on evidence-based curriculum and one on broader resilience building in youth. And finally, there's a parent caregiver check-in, which we encourage you to use when you're doing one-on-one check-ins by phone or with families. Also, we will be, it's not yet up there yet, but by the end of next week, I hope, home safety guide, as we'll talk about a little later, infographic that'll be in English and Spanish. All of this, the caregiver check-ins, also translated and available in Spanish. And finally, we're going to be walking you through a curriculum today, and we're going to be providing you with a slide deck in English and a slide deck in Spanish that you can use so that you will be able to, when kiddos come back at the beginning of January, you'll actually have a curriculum. You'll want to tailor it, obviously, that you can use. Next slide. So we hope that you'll leave today with a greater sense of confidence that you can facilitate a virtual parent prevention education session, not preventing parents. And as you'll hear, we're actually talking about that session being done in the context of parents and caregivers, of course. We're using parents to talk about caregivers, guardians, grandma, auntie, whoever is the person who's living with, taking care of that youth. That you'll feel more confident to do that. Also that you'll feel confident to discuss how parents can safely store opioids, alcohol, marijuana, cannabis, tobacco products, and guns, firearms at home. That as our youth are spending more time at home right now, not all of it's supervised. There are families where that supervision is there. It's really important that we have safer homes. And last, we're going to be talking about facilitating non-judgmental conversations with families, with parents. about how to engage with their children about these issues. So that's where we're headed, and I'm going to turn it over to Alicia Wolf. Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you, Shelley. So I'm going to be walking through the curriculum with you, and some activities we're going to do, and then some of them, for the sake of time, we're just going to talk about what that would look like. So first, you're going to need to obviously plan your virtual parent prevention session, and we're calling it more of a family education session because for the purpose of the session, we're going to involve the youth. So firstly, we need to step out of our own comfort zone, as many of us have already had to do in the last several months with COVID, and familiarize yourself with technology, obviously, and figuring out the best platform to work with your families and students, and really get comfortable doing that. We also have to overcome our fears and intimidation of parents. Parents can often be guarded, in my experience, and more so than ever, we really need to think of parents as our allies. Traditionally, youth would have been spending most of their time during a week at school, and now that is switched. So youth are spending the majority of their time at home, and we really need to connect with the parents to start to create safer environments. Again, we're not able to see, hear, smell things that might be going on in a way that we used to. So really connecting with those parents and seeing them as our allies. These unprecedented times require us to withhold judgment of our families. We were talking a little bit before the session started about some of the things that you see and hear when you're holding online classrooms or online sessions. And none of us had the opportunity to really prepare for life in COVID. So many of our families have multiple people in the home at a time. People don't always have the luxury of having a quiet space or a private space to be working in. So just really recognizing the challenges that this holds for our families. So that would also hold true for when you're actually giving the session, just recognizing noise levels and people that might be going by in someone's home, because we're really inviting ourselves into our families' homes. Next, you're going to need to determine how best to connect with your parents and guardians, and I'll address that a little bit more in logistics. But figuring out, what language you're going to need to hold your sessions in, timing, etc. And then again, as I stated, we're going to include the youth to make this family education. We really want to launch that conversation between the students, the youth, and their adults in their lives, and so we're going to include them. Next. So in terms of logistics, along those lines of including the youth, we're going to suggest using the youth school device to minimize any technical difficulties and increase participation. Throughout the country and really throughout the world, school districts have issued devices for students to be continuing their education. So that might be a laptop, it might be a Chromebook, it might be an iPad. Whatever your youth is used to using to log in for school, to do their education, that's what we want them to use for this session, because then we're going to really minimize those challenges in terms of logging in and parents' familiarity. It really kind of bypasses that, and hopefully it's going to increase your participation. Promoting the session through an advisory or homeroom class, so determining the best way to talk about the session and get individuals involved, get your youth involved again, sort of advertising it through them. And then you want to aim for about 10 to 20 families to participate. And we're really sort of limiting those numbers so that you can have a rich conversation with them. And also for some of the activities that you're going to be doing, you don't want to have too many participants. If you find like you have a large number of families that want to participate, you may just need to hold multiple sessions. And then scheduling the event at a time that works for parents. In my district here in Santa Fe, many of our parents don't have the option of working from home. So they're out of the home during the day. So you may need to hold an evening session or a lunchtime session, really figuring out the best time that's going to work for them and accommodating their needs. And then we recommend offering separate monolingual sessions so that translations aren't necessary. And again, this is really a timing issue. Many students in our district, the students are bilingual, Spanish and English speakers, but the parents are often monolingual Spanish speakers. So figuring out what's going to be the most comfortable language for them and offering them a session in that language. And simply, again, translating doubles the amount of time for your session. These are going to be the goals of your family education session. Primarily, we obviously want to prevent youth opioid and other substance use. We're going to do this through strengthening parent-child connections and creating safer home environments. Engaging the youth and parents in the prevention conversation. And again, this is partially because now families are together much more often. Everyone's in the home. So having some of those private conversations only with the parents or the adults, guardians, is less likely. You know, the truth is, even if you tried to just involve the parents, the kids are in the other room listening. So engaging them together in that conversation. And it's really an opportunity to also learn what might be happening in your school community through the sharing opportunities that take place in the session. For example, with bullying, in our district at least, we're finding there's a lot less bullying because students aren't in school together. However, we recently found out that in an apartment complex, there's a lot of things happening that are impacting our students. So it's an opportunity to hear from your families and your youth about what they might be experiencing. And then lastly, to connect parents to school and community resources that they may not have been familiar with prior to the session. You obviously need to start your session with some introductions. So you would introduce yourself and whatever co-facilitators you may have with you. And then we want to do a fun introduction of the participants that supports them connecting to each other. So that's going to support the parent-child connection. So participants would mute their microphone for about 2 minutes to discuss with each other, and then to return to the group, the participants introduce each other. So for that, we wanted to give you 2 options, and then we'd actually like you to put in the chat, I'll read our 2 options, and then for you to put in the chat any questions that you have that you've found are good introductions for families. So the 2 options that we have is what is or was your favorite subject when you were my age? And option 2 would be, if you were a teacher for a day, what subject would you want to teach? So again, the youth are going to be asking their parents or guardians these questions, and then the parents are asking the youth, and when they'd come back, they'd introduce each other. So yeah, please write any ideas that you have of a good conversation starter in terms of introductions. We'll just get a couple of ideas. This is really just introductory questions. So if anybody has any experience of running groups with families and has a good conversation starter, a good thing to introduce people, that's really the goal.
Got a few of them, Alicia. You want me to read them or you want to?
I can read them. So what is your favorite meal to have or cook together as a family? What was your favorite food when you were my age? If you could go on vacation anywhere, where would you go? Great, those are some great ones. Thank you, those of you that provided those. So again, just any sort of conversation starter that's going to get them to connect with each other. I'm sure there are other ideas out there, but we wanted you to have those too. You can go to the next. Wait, like, what would be the superpower of your choice? Want to throw that one in at the end there.
I like that one.
That is a good one. All right, we're also going to do this activity you all are going to participate in. So asking families about how has the virus impacted youth. So you want to use a platform that you're familiar with. For the purpose of today, we're going to use Mentimeter, but there's lots of other options out there, Padlet, Jamboard, etc. And depending on the familiarity with technology, this can be a relatively quick activity. So we're going to have you go ahead and do that. Shelly's going to, you're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So you are going to go to menti.com and you'll enter the code. And you can either open a new tab on your whatever Chromebook or desktop that you're using, or you can also do it on a smartphone. So you'll enter that code and go ahead and respond to the question. And Shelly is going to present her screen that'll show us some ideas. All the patience of technology that we need. So Shelly, we're seeing you. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Shelly. So we've got bored, isolation, lonely, mental health challenges. So using this kind of platform is kind of a fun way to get responses. It's anonymous. And gives a good visual impact statement about what people might be experiencing.
It is free to use mentimeter.com, if it's okay for me to add, and it's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, and what the option that we chose for today is what's called a word cloud. They do have other presentations that you can choose from as well. So if you're not familiar with Mentimeter, it's a good one to check out. And again, there are other options as well. Less access to adults. I'm seeing some really great things here. Loneliness, depression, behind in classes, helplessness, Netflix. It would be YouTube for my 12-year-old.
And how about Netflix parties for
yes.
Cedric students that they host at their school? Yeah.
Great. So that gives us a good idea. Thank you, Shelly, for presenting that. We can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Alicia, we have a question. Is there a way for the user to save this word cloud?
I believe it automatically saves your responses. And then Jamboard is another one, and it does, which is through the Google Suites. Jamboard saves them, but you do have to be careful that it'll delete things if you get rid of anything. There's no way to recover that, which I learned from experience. Okay. But I believe in Mentimeter that it also can save your responses. Good question. Yes, you could also do a screenshot. And thank you guys. So again, part of the idea of our session is for you to get the experience of what your families would be doing. So next we're going to ask about parent and youth connecting. And we would recommend that for this one, you actually have a conversation, a verbal conversation with your families. Today, we're just going to encourage you to put in the chat versus talking out loud. And again, that's just to reduce our time. So a large group discussion on how are parents and youth connecting during this time. So you'd solicit input and post it where it can be seen by all participants, and provide a list of ways to connect and encourage families to try one new thing in the week to come. So you're going to go ahead and do that right now. So if you want to give us a couple of ideas for how you think parents and youth are connecting during this time. So we've got playing board and card games, Google Duo. I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to figure out what that is. Making cards for assisted living communities, watching movies, jigsaw puzzles, going for walks, saying thank you to grocery store clerks, walking on the beach.
I wish I lived near the beach.
But I was just going to say, I wish I lived near a beach to do that.
They're having lunch together since they're all at home. You know, that wouldn't be possible if everyone wasn't at home.
Yes. Great, some great ideas. Dinner, family time. And again, some of these things might have been things your families were doing to connect prior to COVID, but they might look different now. Great, thanks for contributing, everyone. Teaching simple chores, going for rides, planting a garden, baking, excellent. Great, so those are some good ideas. Any last ideas? Going for walks, thank you, Vanessa. All right, thank you. So we'll stop in the chat. These are some other ways that we've found for parents and youth to connect. Many of those came up in the chat. So planning and cooking a meal together, going for a walk or run outside as a family, doing a video workout together, visiting the library online and reading a book together, taking a virtual tour of a museum or a walk through the Grand Canyon with Google Earth, hosting a virtual dinner for family or friends, and playing a card or board game. Great. So those are lots of ideas. We want to really encourage our families to be connecting with each other. And I think it's even more important because it's challenging sometimes being all together in your houses. At least I find at my house sometimes that's challenging. So finding some fun things to do to connect in a positive way. Next slide. So you will not be doing this activity, but this is another connecting activity for your families to participate in. So family activity, which is a shared physical experience, a family scavenger hunt. So you'll instruct your participants to turn off their cameras and take 2 minutes to together go and find the following items in their home. One thing with a face, one thing that means something to the family, and one thing that is useful. Now, 2 minutes does not sound like a lot of time, and that's on purpose. It makes the activity a little competitive and a little more fun. And again, we want them to be doing this together, so they're quickly going through their family or going through their home, trying to find these items. When they return, you're going to be placing them in breakout rooms. And again, if you're using Zoom or we use Google Suites again through my district, using a platform that's familiar to you and making sure that you're comfortable with putting your families in breakout rooms. So about 3 families per room to share the items that they found in their homes. And part of the goal of the session is also to get families to be connecting to each other and hearing ideas from each other so that there's some of the reduction of the isolation that's going on.
If it's okay for me to add, I know some of you may be familiar with the Strengthening Families program, and one of the wonderful things about that is youth talk together, parents talk together, caregivers, and there's a chance for that cross interaction, and we really encourage you to build that in to this parent prevention, family prevention education.
Thank you, Shelley. So sadly, you don't get to do that one. But now that the families have gone through their homes to get their items, we're gonna think about your home in a different way and thinking about your home in terms of safety. So having a whole group discussion on what are some things in your home that could be risky for your youth or their friends. Now, for the purpose of this session and for the purpose of this conversation, we're really focusing on youth ranging from middle to high school students. So roughly, 11, 12 to 17, 18, not toddlers and little ones, because that's a different conversation in terms of safety. I, for example, have a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old at my home, and the things I need to do to keep the 2 of them safe are very different. But making sure that you're really focusing, again, for the purpose of this, on youth, middle school, high school age. So we're going to start kind of going through this home, and we also recognize that in many communities, homes don't necessarily look like the image that we've provided. In Santa Fe, for example, we do not have basements, and very seldom do we have a second level. So thinking of homes in different ways, many families live in apartments or mobile homes, but really just trying to start off the conversation of different rooms in a home that could be potentially risky. So let's go ahead and look at the bathroom. And I encourage you to share your ideas. So what are some things in the home that could be risky? In the bathroom, let's start in the bathroom. Okay, good, medications. Yep, prescription meds, unlocked medicine cabinet, alcohol, the open window with the curtains open, slippery floor, razors. Okay, good. So let's move into, move down the next floor to the kitchen. Any other things in the kitchen? Alcohol came up already. Knives, mouthwash in the bathroom, hot surfaces. Again, focusing on, more middle, high school age students. Medications on the counters, good. Cleaners, liquor, excellent. Moving down into the basement. Again, we don't really have basements in Santa Fe, but kind of a room that maybe youth are hanging out in. Any items there? Aerosol spray cans, excellent. Any other ideas? Yeah, hiding places, glue and solvents. Great responses, thank you, everybody. Carbon monoxide from the furnace, paints, good. Any other place in the house that you can think of that might be unsafe or might have unsafe items in it? The bedroom, attic, their bedrooms, garage, excellent.
Wonder what people are thinking about in the garage.
Yeah, can someone share anything specific? Great, wherever guns are stored, thank you who wrote that one. The car, tools, items to huff. Great. I think in terms of bedrooms too, we don't think about unsupervised time, which a lot of my students have, or unsupervised locations.
Yeah.
Great. Great, really great responses. So Shelly's going to kind of walk us through how we can make our homes a little safer, because that's really our goal here as again, engaging our families in these conversations, helping them to make their homes safer.
Great, next slide. So I think I'm sure as you are listening to this, you're hearing also some of the things that Alicia does in terms of encouraging the conversation. Obviously, people are responding. I really want to highlight the process, right, as well as we walk you through, but making your home safer. So are there things you didn't think about or things that you did that could potentially be dangerous? And as we can see in this slide, right, I was glad that it took a while actually for somebody to mention firearms. And firearms, while that's not the focus of the Opioid Response Network, it is definitely something that we want to be highlighting to our families. I love it, Bob, you just added car keys. I think that's that wasn't on our list. It's also not going to be on our infographic. But again, this is an opportunity for a rich discussion, right? And things that we want to make sure emphasized in that is, numbers of people talked about medications that can be abused, misused, problematically used, and opioids, of course, are one of those. At one point in time, this is several years ago, they said that the most, like 2/3 of the young people who got access to opioids got access to them first through somebody's medicine cabinet. So we really want to be talking to our families, remembering this is a little different than I think what a lot of us often have done, which is directly just parents. This is the youth are going to be together with. Talking about something does not make youth do it. And I think that's, we want talking about it actually gives that opportunity to really deliver that clear message, which is, this is something, if it's a case of a medication, it's something that has a prescribed use. We want to encourage our families to make sure that they are not leaving medications that are expired or, they no longer need that prescription, that they're not leaving them around, especially things like opioids, because that is when that, when you store that medication or even share it, that's when misuse often happens. So it is an opportunity to talk about opioids. It's also an opportunity, and it's interesting, I don't know that I saw anybody commenting on marijuana, cannabis, and tobacco products. Again, it's interesting. We are working with, there was a great graphic done for the state of Colorado that they used marijuana funds, marijuana sales tax funds, because leaving marijuana, cannabis, I don't know what the number of states now, many states it's legal for adults to use, not for people under 21, want to make sure those products, all, vaping devices, huge issue with our young people, all tobacco products and cannabis are safely stored away or locked up. And I think part of what we want to emphasize with our parents and with our youth is, hiding, right? Hiding works for 0 to 5. Hiding doesn't work quite as well for 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old young people who can tend to figure out those hiding places. So I think locking things up gives a stronger message. So encouraging parents to think about, is there a cabinet where they can use a padlock, where they can use a combination lock, a lock with a key, including for liquor and alcohol. Keeping that 6-pack of beer, if your youth weren't around, might have been an okay thing to do, but we want to, again, have them do that scan and talk about, and we will be providing you the opportunity to have that conversation with people after the end of us going through this curriculum outline. We'll actually be doing breakout sessions where you can have a chance to ask that question. And again, if we turn to the next slide, how could you make your home safer? And you ask that question and asking it, not to judge what people have in their homes, right? Of course, right? To really give families a chance to go, God, I never thought about, God, that's an area that I never thought about. If I leave my, my vaping device out, that, my young person could get it. Where could I lock it up? So, or, after the pandemic, it's not just their own youth, it's their cousins who come over, it's their friends who come over. It may not be your youth. You may be confident that your youth isn't using substances or isn't going to get into your medication cabinet. But when they have friends over, you don't know. When you have cousins over, siblings. So we're going to, like I said, practice in the breakout session. That is going to segue into, Cedric's going to do a brief piece on a chance to talk to parents about how can they, when you start talking about these unsafe or potentially unsafe items like medications or cannabis and marijuana or vaping devices, it provides an opportunity for parents to actually talk to their young people about these things that can be dangerous. So Cedric, talk about some things we can share with parents.
So I'm really excited to be here again with you guys, and thank you, Shelly, and thank you, Alicia, for all the amazing information that we're giving to parents. Today, I'm actually going to be before you really brief, but I wanted to go over some really important tips that I think are great starters for parents or anybody in a guardianship at home to begin to have some of these conversations with youth. This is a very different time, and most of us probably have interacted with teenagers and adolescents at some point. So having very normal conversations, we know, can sometimes be a challenge, let alone those with adolescents who have had the pressure of the trauma of 2020 and now the things that we're going through with increasing numbers as we're shifting and really pivoting heavily to prevention in substance abuse. So when you're having these conversations with, hey, how do we live this prevention life at home, virtually or remotely or in these conditions, there's a few things that you should remember. Quick tips. First of all, use their names. I know it sounds so elementary, like, well, yeah, like I gave them the names. I know their names. Use their names. When you go to insert yourself into situations in your home that require some type of conversation between youth and parents, you want to be able to enter into the conversation not from a place of a totalitarian or from a top-down place, but you want to engage with your youth as equal collaborative partners in the solutions of increasing the productivity or the success of your home. So this is something you need to remember as I go through these tips. Always, always purpose over power. Always purpose over power. So you want to be able to foster those great relationships, conversations, and make those connections that Alicia was referring to really, really strong. Use their names. Equal sign of respect in the conversation that really perks a youth's ear up. Secondly, make sure that you're chatting whilst doing, meaning chat with scholars. I'm sorry, I say scholars in my school. Chat with youth to develop a condition of comfort in the relationship before going to enter into the stickiness of a conversation in your home. So when you're doing the dishes together or passing by or checking in on their daily affect with homework and remote learning, talk to them and start to build that relationship with them in their home. Many of the parents are just not speaking to youth because they're tired of each other or they've run out of the things to say, or parents are finding out for the first time in a huge way, they're actually learning who their children are because the children are present with them the majority of the day, where typically schools house youth for the majority of the day. So there's some things you need to do with just some foundational relationship building. Chat whilst doing things with your with your youth. Earn the right to speak. I know it's tough. I'm a parent. I have two small ones. Sometimes they say why, and you want to give the answer because I said so, right? Like you don't need to give them the why because you're the parent. In these cases, you need to make sure that you're equaling your voice in the conversation. You're inviting the youth to an equal place at the table in the conversation. And you're making sure that you're presenting them with thoughtful pieces of content that make them not feel it's a waste of their time. Earn your right to speak. That's difficult for us to do as adults because of just adult ego with youth. Be interested. Don't come dry. I know it's tough. As educators, we're trained how to engage youth, right? Parents have to also become engagement ambassadors in their home with their youth. So figure out a way to pique interest. If you know you're going into a conversation with a youth that's a little sticky, I would leverage as much vocabulary of their personal interest into the conversation to keep them hooked in. Another thing you want to do, set yourself with challenges. Don't go into the conversation looking for you to automatically know what the end product will be. Allow the conversation to develop in a very organic way with your youth at home. There's a really brief thing that says here, what was their highlight over whatever the thing was? If you're incorporating the things that they're interested in, then ask them for their own feedback and voice, and then be a listener far more than a talker and see how that may challenge yourself in the conversation. You also want to make sure, again, that a conversation trumps the answers. This is key in anchoring yourself as a listener with your youth. As parents, as adults, we're quick to figure out the solutions. It's our job. It's in our blood. We were born to nurture children and then protect them and keep them from the things and the dangers they don't yet know about. You don't know what you don't know. That was a phrase that was often communicated to me growing up, right? You think you're grown, but you just don't know what you don't know yet. Well, in some instances, they have answers that we don't have. They have a solution that we don't have, or they've got that missing piece of the formula we've been racking our brains of how to figure out in our own homes. Conversation trumps answers. Opportunity for them to be an answer and decision maker is key. Remember the little things, the real little, right? But to us, they seem little, but for your youth, it may be big. Incorporate the small actions that they didn't think that you saw in building a relationship. Let them know that you're aware and listening, and then ask direct questions. As youth are, they are the greatest people with the greatest intuition of authenticity. So when we ask a lot of roundabout questions, what happens is our lack of direct response or our direct questions to scholars and youth pretty much lets them know that I don't know what I'm doing here. You don't know what you're doing. Throwing your hands up, right? Ask them direct questions. Let them know exactly what you want from them. And now we're going to have a modeling of this. Whoa, real practice in a webinar. Look at this. And Alicia already kicked it off. So I actually contacted one of the participants to see if they would volunteer. Jillian, are you ready? Come on camera, come on voice. Are you ready?
I think so.
You think so? All right, Jillian. Jillian, you have the tips. You've seen what we can do. This is what I need you to do. Role play. Jillian, you are a parent. Are you a parent? Let me first and foremost.
I am not a parent. No,
I am
a happy childless millennial.
This is even better, right? Like a fresh green participant to really see how we apply these very specific tips. So this is awesome. I didn't know that before. Jillian, put your role-playing cap on. Imagine you have some youth in your home and you figured you gotta get them on page. We gotta, hey, listen, I know the dynamics of the house have been one way, but it needs to change. I'll be honest with you. I used to have a whole bar set up. Now it's in a very locked closet in my bedroom with a key that can only be accessed in a drawer by me because my kids are home so much more. So there's things that are happening, right? Jillian, you have youth in your home, you got the tips. I need for you to let all of us hear what an opening conversation would sound like in your home with your youth, utilizing some, if not reference, of these tips, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'm going, for the sake of names, I'm going to use my puppy's name, which is Willow. So I would begin the conversation as just saying, hey, Willow, I know that I just want to maybe let's wash the dishes together tonight. Let's do something together tonight because I haven't seen you all week. You've been on the computer doing school and I've been on the computer working and I feel like we haven't had that chance to connect. So let's do the dishes tonight. So then going from there, I think that just like a casual conversation, did you like dinner tonight? What are your plans for the weekend? Anything like that. I know definitely being, like you said, being interested in what they said is really important. I taught in New Jersey actually for 6 years. So I know from being a teacher that it's very important to be interested in what they're doing and saying. So saying, how's soccer going? I was really excited at your last game that you got a goal. That's really awesome. I know that you've been working really hard at doing that.
So Jillian, I'm actually going to cut right in.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for that. And you did the things, and I was trying to mime right when she was hitting the notes. So Willie, is that the name of the dog? Is it Willie?
Willow.
Willow. Okay, so she said, hey, Willow. She used the name. Let's do the dishes tonight. Chat whilst doing. I know you've been really busy, and I know that you've been really busy, and I've been really busy. She validated the time of the youth, so she made herself in a position to earn the right to speak. She said, hey, I know you're going to be on that Call of Duty and everything. She showed she was interested in what they're interested in, right? And again, her reference to a balanced conversation invites their ability to answer. Fantastic, Jillian. Thank you very much for being put on.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you with that. These are just some very helpful tips. And again, the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Thank you so much, Cedric, and Jillian too. That was awesome. And Alicia's going to take us to the wrap up of this session. And obviously you can do that technique as well with your parents. So Alicia, let's go to the next slide. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, so hopefully you can use some of those conversation starters, encouraging your parents to use those to connect with their youth and having this important prevention conversation. So you want to give resources and wrap up your session with your families. Again, stressing the importance of the parent and youth connecting to each other, just like Cedric just talked about. Giving clear messaging, encouraging the delay and absence of substance use. Also remembering for a lot of individuals and families and youth, as many of you put in the word cloud, are feeling depressed and sad and lonely. So really talking about healthier ways to deal with some of those hard emotions that our students might be going through. You're going to provide your contact information and local resources. Obviously, you want to personalize the resources that you're providing to your families, and then thank your families for participating and taking any questions if there's time in your session. So now we're going to give you the opportunity to break out into sessions and practice a little bit, and Shelley's going to explain how we're going to do that.
Great, thank you so much. And you will get, in terms of this prevention curriculum outline, you will have the opportunity to access the slide deck that will lay this out. And again, we gave some recommended times. You get to choose. You're the one who's going to be doing this. Can we go to the next slide, or is Rachel, you telling me? Where are we at with the next slide? Yeah, wonderful. Okay, this is your opportunity to practice. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide into breakout groups. We'll be in there for about 7 minutes. Groups will be 5 people, and we're asking you to count off from 1 to 5. Those of you who've done breakout groups, we all have, know that you can spend 5 minutes deciding who's first, right? So we encourage you to use, there's lots of different ways you can do that too. We're just going to do it by counting off to 1 to 5. Make sure you unmute, right? So when you count, first person's going to be the facilitator. Persons 2 and 3 will be the parents. You're just role-playing parents. And persons 4 and 5 will role-play being middle school youth. 5 will also be the scribe, and we'll tell you what the job of the scribe is at the end. The facilitator is going to ask, again, in a non-judgmental, open way, right? How can you make your home safer? You know, we've talked about some different things. You know, think about visitors like other youth, you know, especially during unsupervised time, that you can't always be watching, you know, you might be out working, whatever's going on. How can you make your home safer? So it is random in terms of our breakout groups. Then we're going to have the facilitator will have 4 minutes to have that discussion. Again, we're role playing, and then we're going to put something, a banner across the top. They'll say, pause, stop, and just to process, what is it like, you know, to have that conversation, to hold that space, and what can we learn from doing that, from this experience? So we'd like the scribe to record 1 comment that you can share in the chat with the group when we come back. Any questions about, and you can put the question in the chat about your assignment. We will put these instructions. Someone has a different training. We understand that, said to me. But let us go ahead, go back to that opportunities to practice. If I don't see any questions, again, the facilitator, your question will be in the banner across the top. So you'll have a cue, and we will be in the breakout groups for 7 minutes. And we hope you have a good experience checking that out and learning something and talking about the process. Good. Let's do it.
Any other quick feedback? One thing my group talked about was sharing about National Drug Take Back Days in your community. That's an important resource you could share with your families. The other thing my group came up with was talking about those families that are in denial maybe. And so I sometimes have that conversation with youth about like, well, what do you think your friends are doing? Or what do you think other people might be doing? Maybe 8th graders, because I'm working with 6th graders this year. So kind of taking that away from the pressure of talking about their youth. Crystal shares my group takeaway. Parent-to-child conversation. While we make things more secure in our house, we should have a conversation of why some medication or alcohol are okay for some people, but not for others. Excellent way to have that conversation, Crystal. Thank you for sharing that. Any other?
We took away that there's a lot of folks who have issues with keeping their home safe and communication issues between the parent and the youth, and knowing that there's underlying issues that exist that are not so much keeping the house safe. We're keeping our eyes and our ears on other aspects of the home life and not fixating ourselves on this issue. But that was something that we really did come like, my dad does not let me do what I want to do, and there's something more to that that we're not getting to. That was something that I liked.
Nice. Any other scribes have anything from your group?
Yeah, we kind of put an emphasis on creating a respectful dialogue between teens and the adults and around medication safety and substance use safety, making sure to use the tips that Cedric gave us earlier, using names, keeping it conversational and respectful both ways.
Excellent, thank you.
Jessica Fowler's group said that our takeaway is making sure to acknowledge the thoughts of youth and their ideas. Parents and kids usually have the same goals and needs. They just have different ways of getting there. Kathleen Whalen said, my group talked about how kids get ideas from their friends about items to use, and that can harm them, that parents would not think about a harmful item that should be talked about and secured. Let's see. And then Ruth Romsberg, I'm going to hope that's pronounced. Oh, yes, I'm getting a head shake. Talked about concerns that the child may be spending too much time on their computer, and about asking your child to show you what they like to look at on their computer. Ask them to show you the video games they play, and this will open an opportunity for a dialogue.
And Rachel, that was actually a really great contribution, because that's also what my group was talking about, that last point of internet usage and monitoring in the home. One of our participants spoke about how, I believe it was her daughter, she was able to set up the Apple account under her as a parent or guardian to then be able to get alerts about the usage and the sites that are on. Another thing that came up in the conversation was whoever is the provider of your internet or Wi-Fi, if you are the account holder, you can go into your account and you can actually see all the traffic that's happening on your internet and your Wi-Fi connected to your account. Every site, the time, how much, etc. So look into those protective and monitoring barriers for your home.
Great. And we also wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions sort of about the curriculum specifically, about how that would go or what that looks like? And Rachel, again, if people aren't able to chat publicly, maybe you can share if anything comes up for you.
Rachel, just say in response to that, be prepared when you're doing anything, as you all know, on Zoom. Things like that happen, and they may happen during, this is part of what it means to facilitate anything right now, including parent prevention, family prevention, education. And, we're flexible.
I have to say, I think actually sometimes it's good in a way to have that happen for us, because I think so many of our families are really intimidated by being online and scared about what that experience is like. And so for us to admit, like, it doesn't always work out for me either, and to kind of help bridge that comfort level of this is new for everybody. So it's okay if it happens.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll have a chance to ask questions again at the end. So you will have access to a slide deck that you can tailor. You can put your own graphics, you can do whatever, but it'll give you the ability to do these exercises and for the families that you're working with. So at this point, if I can welcome Michelle Baroni, who is here with us. Michelle, if you would share a little bit about your experience working with the Hispanic Latinx families, like to bring in some of those cultural considerations.
Of course, my pleasure. First and foremost, my name is again Michelle Baroni. I work with youth, Latino youth, specifically in Atlanta, Georgia. And so when thinking about doing some type of parent involvement activities, the main thing that I have to worry about always is the cultural aspect. Keeping up with that cultural competency and understanding what the needs of my community are. Like I said before in the previous conferences or the webinars that we've done, what necessarily is going on in Atlanta may not necessarily be what's going on in your neck of the woods. However, maybe it is, regardless if you're in a rural setting as opposed to what I'm in more of a metropolitan setting. Some of these things may be very similar to what you guys are experiencing. I know that since 2010, many of our parents have dealt with a lot of issues with immigration and checkpoints and whatnot. So they're not able to be with their children as much as they would. So especially since the COVID, jobs in Atlanta were really scarce. So a lot of folks found jobs in other states, such as Alabama or in South Carolina or in Tennessee. And so they were not able to be with their youth. And so they would be left behind with grandma, or they would have their aunt taking care of them. And so it's not so much just being able to meet with the parents as it is meeting with the extended families and saying, I want to make sure that if you're the caretaker at the moment, that you're getting this information. And if the parents can, then it's important for them to get the information as well. The intake process is probably the most important process that has to be done when you're meeting your parents. This is the time that you'll find out whether or not what is the most adequate time to meet, what topics they're most interested in learning about, because there's certain topics that they're just not, I really don't care to learn about that, and that's okay. However, there might be topics that they do need to listen to. And then it's your job to say, I know that this is not important at the moment. However, what you're going to learn is going to make sense once you finish the project. So I think this is a intake, super duper duper important. Make sure that you can have also the proper staff. If you're working with staff who speak a specific language, to have that staff represented through the youth. Like Alicia was saying, she has a lot of students who are bilingual. However, their parents only speak one language. Making sure that you hire on staff that can communicate to the parents is super duper duper important. And one thing that I've always done, and this is something cultural for my community, is if we're taking away the time from our parents, with the Hispanic community, meal time is the only time that they have free time. We're taking away their family time at that moment. And as crazy as it sounds, we like to speak our love through food. And I think that's pretty universal with all of us. And if we're in the middle of their meal time, then we should be able to provide some type of food, a type of meal. We call them an incentive, so they come. Great attendance. And obviously you're taking that burden away from the mom to not have to cook. So that is the 3 takeaways that I want you to get away from this, is making sure that you are giving them a reason to want to participate. Obviously, you can't do an incentive like food at the moment because we're in the age of COVID. However, you can be able to, there's resources in your community to help provide food for their homes. I just know that it's very important for us to know that these are their necessities. They need these things in order for them to function as a family. And if they're fed, if they're doing well, they'll continue because they're seeing you care about me. You're caring for my family enough for me to want to be able to join in. And they're going to be thankful. I know my families. I know how thankful they are. And I'm just so happy that they have been able to join in. And they only do join in, I think they want to hear me talk. But I also feel like they're liking the fact that we're there and we're showing our faces and we're there on the forefront, making sure that they know that we love them and that they're part of this program. So if anything, take that from me. Sorry, my part is really short, but I know Cedric's got some important things to say too. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Michelle. Listen, short, brief, but strong and impactful. I'm going to be before you no more than 2 minutes. I mean, the way that this looks again, and by no means am I like the sole elected ambassador of the African-American community, right? But what I can tell you is that there are aspects of it in working in the communities that I work with that are very similar. And much of the way that Michelle spoke about the culture speaking through their love through food, which is hands down very accurate for a lot of cultures. Music, athleticism in the African-American culture is huge. Even in the way that we title things. So I can send out what seems like an academic principle message, but when I do it, I'm very cognizant of my audience. So the title isn't like Principles Addressed. It's called SEQ Mixtape Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, right? SEQ standing for Southeast Queens, mixtape standing for the EPs and the abbreviation and the way that distribution of hip hop was out. Queens being a huge hip hop community, Volume 1, Volume 2 is like additions, right? So it's simple things, leveraging the language that they enjoy, certain things that are key. Don't forget and there's so much fluidity between gender and things of that nature now, but keeping in mind whatever a young youth identifies themselves as things that culture and gender that may be applicable to them that may not be applicable to all. So there's so much for you to consider, but in the African-American culture, as much influence from mentors and pop or societal culture, very, very heavy. The Barack Obamas, the Kamala Harrises, the Kaepernicks, etc. Leverage as much of that celebrity in your influence with scholars, very helpful.
Great, thank you. So now we actually have a chance to take some questions, which is nice. And I have to say, Cedric, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about you showing us the clip from The Mandalorian, right? Which is again from there's just ways that you can bring in, right, from the cultural resources that your families and your youth are excited by, and then integrate that and use that as a springboard for discussion. There was a question which we've been discussing in the chat, which is if you don't have the funding, I assume, or the ability to, we used to, what are some other ways that we can participation? What are some other ways we can draw people in? And Michelle, you want to share a little bit of what you responded?
Yeah, so Jessica Fowler had asked a question about how is it that we're going to give these parents or these families food when it's not. In the last webinar, we discussed about that in my clubhouse, the way that I have been taking care of that portion was I was making deliveries at home. Now, if your grant does not have the funding for that, or if that's not part of your funding, then there's different resources out there in the community, such as food pantries, churches, other 501c3s who are willing and able to give folks food. Me specifically, I had to cater my program to do these deliveries because of the fact that my families cannot drive. And some of them don't even have a social security number, and some of these folks ask for social security numbers. So you have to be able to change things or make sure that you're able to meet your parents for where they're at. Unfortunately, my parents can't do those things. They cannot drive. So it's up to me to make sure that I'm taking care of them because that's what they signed up for.
And I'm in a Title I community too. Leverage your community partnerships. They will fund and give away, most of them for the purposes of whatever their charters of an organization are, or compliance, or funders that they have. They have to do a lot of this community and charitable work. They love to give to schools very quickly. Schools, community organizations, after school, CBO, nonprofits, anything that's doing youth development work, easy.
Right.
Yeah, I want to add, think creatively about incentives too. I agree that food is always a great incentives across cultures. But, if you're hosting an event through a school, finding out if students can get credit for participating, for showing up with their families. I know that's something we often do at our school. So thinking different ways about how we can support families and give them incentives to show up. And even something as simple as sending an email afterwards. I know with my students, they really like that, just saying, good job, I appreciate you showing up, because we have to look at different ways right now.
Yeah, Paulina added that, just thanking people for participating makes a difference, makes it more likely they'll show up next time. The next question from Chris Menard, which is, I think, I'm so glad you asked this, Chris. What about having kids in this educational session? It is different than just talking to parents. Will they feel uncomfortable? And Alicia, you want to start with that?
Yes, I was going to respond to it anyway. I agree. It is an uncomfortable conversation. And again, the reality is that these families are oftentimes all together at home now. So even if we wanted to have a private session with just the parents, it's a lot harder to do. And the youth are going to be listening oftentimes anyway. I know my son, when I think he isn't listening, my 12-year-old will come in and give his feedback. Like, you're not supposed to be listening. So recognizing that they're present anyway, and I really think it's a different way to look at having the conversation and involving them. And somebody had put in the chat as a debrief earlier that I had read, which was really good, about, why is it okay for adults to maybe drink alcohol? or use medicinal marijuana, in a different way than youth. And so really engaging the youth in that conversation about their own safety. And just like Michelle said, we have the same goal here, which is we want you to be safe and happy and healthy and live good lives, right? And so really engaging the youth in that conversation, even if it feels a little awkward, how important it is. And I think it also can build up that trust between the youth and their parents in a different way.
I would also say equally prioritize some type of child engagement or child care activity to be done at the same time, simultaneously as you're having the parent gathering. And it doesn't mean the kids or the youth can't be in the meeting or they can't be in the meeting at all, but you want to have within close proximity, if your facilities can accommodate as such, some type of alternate engagement activity for the youth so that the parents don't have to worry about whether or not to have child care or attending your session. That alone would actually garner great attendance and is very much appreciated by your parent body.
If it's something that's in person, right? So this is where the virtual, what we're doing virtually versus what can happen.
Maybe, or set up a breakout room and an activity very much like Rachel did. When you have the participants that are there, you can send the youth over into that, whether it's a movie screening or something else, and then still keep a main room with your parents and adults.
Great. That's another creative
Be
way.
real. I mean, if they're listening in on it, there's certain things that do need to be separate. But I think it's also telling for the youth that they're kind of interested in knowing what their parents are learning about. I don't think that's too bad. Sometimes we see all too much youth who just don't care and they're in their own little world and they're on their cell phones and they don't care about the outside world. The fact that they're honing in and they're listening in, I don't think that's too bad. Obviously, if their conversation between parent and facilitator needs to be more private, then obviously go through the other ways of, like Cedric was saying, find an activity, alternate activity. But I mean, if they're listening in onto something that you're supposed to speak with your youth anyways, let them listen in. I don't think it's that big of a deal that they're listening on to something.
And we're hoping that there's a benefit, right? Because again, that builds that relationship, gives them something to talk about, gives them an opportunity to really, really strengthen that parent-child bond. And I appreciate, Michelle, what you're adding in. And, the beauty of having all these different resources is, a facilitator can say, let's talk about that more. I'd love to follow up with you about that, right? And I think it is important as facilitators that we do feel that empowerment to know, we don't have to, everything doesn't have to be dealt with in a session, right? That would be a great discussion for us to have, and that you feel that you can do that. We are going to be bringing this session to a close. Is there any last thing that anyone would like to share? Let's show the last slide. And Rachel, I want to again give a huge shout out. This is great participation. I'm really excited that we were able to have a participatory session this time, do the breakout sessions we did, have the kind of interaction that we have had. And and that all of you have been so engaged. It really, I have to say, for us as presenters, parents are a very important part of the prevention equation, right? I say parents again, I mean parents, caregivers, guardians, aunties, grandmas, whoever's doing that. And we need everyone who's wrapped around kiddos, right? We need educators, we need everyone who's wrapped around the scholars to be engaged in substance prevention. We do know parents actually are a critical part of youth decisions, whether or not they use substances. If a parent gives a clear message to their youth that it is important to me to protect your brain, your body, your development, that you avoid, stay away from, don't use alcohol, opioids, marijuana, that's something, there is a big difference. We know, we were asking that question between the teenage brain and 30-year-old brain in terms of development and vulnerability and what we need to be paying attention to. So when parents give that message clear, again, in an open way in conversation and that kind of respectful engagement, that we've incorporated, that Cedric included in the curriculum, and this experience, right, of having the opportunity to learn together, that will in fact lead towards healthier young people who either don't use substances at all or who delay their use of substances, because every year we can delay, the healthier they'll be.